going to discuss how you can win the acquisition race and delve into the tech and tactics that can fuel success. We'll cover off introductions and then we'll get into the details. So if I could ask my panelists to please introduce yourselves and say a few words about your role. Kev?
Sure. So, hi everyone. I'm Kevin Andrews. I'm Head of Performance Marketing at LiveScore Group. So LiveScore Group comprises of LiveScore Media, which is the Scores app, and then also the operator side, so Virgin Bet and LiveScore Bet in various different territories.
Hi guys, my name is Rahoul. I'm the Head of Acquisition and Growth at Betway. Been with Betway for around 5.5 years, mainly looking after all the acquisition channels, that's PPC, paid social, mobile, and display and programmatic. Been in the industry for around 10.5 years. Thank you for having me.
Hi guys, I'm Angelo, Head of Biddable Media and Acquisition at Kindred. I've been at Kindred for 9 years, and within the biddable space, me and my team look after programmatic paid social, mobile app acquisition, and PPC.
Yeah, good afternoon everyone. My name is Niki. I'm SVP Marketing Services at Sportradar, and as such I'm responsible for our advertising business as well as our Vikes, the company we acquired a couple of years ago, which you will also hear about later today. And I'm really happy to welcome you all here. Great to see so many new and familiar faces.
Awesome. So let's start with a very broad look at acquisition, which is really about how channels work together as part of a media mix. It would be great to hear how each of you currently approaches your acquisition strategy. Angelo, can you kick us off?
Sure. So at Kindred, we've been on a bit of a journey for the last, I'd say, 6-7 years, really, in trying to really define what acquisition, or where acquisition sits within our overall funnel and sort of media mix. I say we've been on a bit of a journey because, in reality, initially we were very sort of guilty of seeing acquisition as a very sort of bottom of the funnel sort of group of channels, and a bit like left alone to their own device to really deliver new users for our brands, whilst kind of this journey again we've been on has really sort of taught us that you have to look at the funnel differently, and you can't really look at acquisition in isolation, because if you do so, then the result of that, you will regret the result of that quite dearly, as you basically, the opportunity for growth shrink over time as you just focus on one part of the funnel. So yeah, that's kind of, right now, over the last couple of years, we have been able to redefine the way we look at acquisition, and there's a much more broader approach to what acquisition is and does for us, which includes elements of branding, and then kind of what branding does within the media mix, and how branding assists acquisition and is essential for that, and obviously measurement and tech, which is kind of I would say kind of the holy grail of how we are able to identify how brand helps acquisition.
Cool. Rahoul, how about you?
Very similar approach. I mean, we look at acquisition as a whole. That's across all channels. So, you can't just, as Angelo was saying, you just can't look at the bottom funnel and then think it's going to work and then put all the money there. Every time when you sort of open up extra other channels, to say, especially when display and programmatic, when you sort of start putting money over there, I mean, it's, you're not going to see the return or the effect of that the next day or in a month, but it's a slow process, but you do see the impact of that in a couple of months, to be honest, and then you see that brand increasing, and then sort of it's actually working across other channels. So media mix, but again, we're not there yet. Obviously, in order to sort of find out the effect of that, you need to start investing more in terms of the MMM or those sort of stuff. But yeah, so you need to have like a significant investment towards that as well. But it does definitely help. So we look at acquisition as a whole rather than feeding to just 1-2 performance channels during. So yeah.
Cool. So we've heard how the operators on the panel approach their strategy. Kev, do you have a bit of a different approach?
Yeah, so at LiveScore Group, we've obviously got a bit of a USP where we've got the Scores app that complements the betting side. So that opens up kind of a wealth of different strategies that we can employ. Obviously, LiveScore can act as a gateway into the betting product. So we have numerous different, we call convergence features available in the app to move players over. But we can also be a bit smarter with the data that LiveScore Media as an app presents us, because we have people that are interested in the brand and aware of the brand, and we can model off those users to find bettors who are also LiveScore customers.
Cool. So one thing that
Can I
oh
just
yeah,
add something?
go on, Niki.
Sorry.
No, I love it. Come on.
just speaking a bit more broadly about the industry, right? I mean, we're working with around about 200 brands in the industry. Last year we've delivered more than 50 billion ad impressions, so we do have a bit of an overview. And the things that I'm always observing about acquisition, I think it's a bit to what you guys said before, right? One thing, a lot of players in the industry struggle generally with measuring and attributing. Yeah, it's a tricky piece, right? Particularly now with cookies slowly going away. Yeah, it will become even more complex in the future. So that's one thing, one big challenge that I'm seeing. The other one is this kind of, there is, at a lot of operators, there seems to be a very strong distinction between this is branding and that's only branding, and this is acquisition and that's only acquisition. And it feels to me that when it comes to sponsoring, for instance, and I'm a huge sports fan, but money doesn't really play a role, right? You just throw money at sponsoring. I'm exaggerating, obviously. And on the other hand, when it comes to acquisition, like each and every penny is counted, and combined with not ideal measurements, I think that leads sometimes to not the smartest decisions. And anything that happens in between, and there's quite a few channels that are somehow in between, I would say, they tend to get forgotten at some point, yeah? Or not kind of get the attention that they should get. And the third thing I'm observing is generally with programmatic, yeah? And obviously we have our own proprietary DSP. We see that we are struggling to find the right people to talk to at an operator who is actually responsible for digital out of home, which is clearly a branding channel, but in many cases it's run by the acquisition team. Yeah? Or same with online video. Yeah? So you sometimes speak with people about online video, which is clearly a branding channel, and they would require you to deliver certain CPAs, which is very hard to achieve in a pure online branding campaign. So that's, for me, sorry to add that, I think that's a bit of the broader picture that I have observed.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we were going to get through this conversation without brand coming up, so that is a perfect leapfrog onto discussing that. So I think especially in this industry, we do have a tendency to look at that bottom of the funnel, so last click, PPC, etc., and we do ignore what is quite a large majority of the funnel. So Angelo, I'm going to go to you to start off again, but how important is the role of branding when we look at acquisition as a whole?
I mean, it's difficult to quantify. It's so important that it's difficult to quantify. And Niki, what you just said there, I think there is a reason why most of people in the industry and most of kind of competitors, and including ourselves, obviously, over the years, we have looked at acquisition in isolation, and we looked at PPC and specifically doubling down on last click attribution driven channels, which obviously PPC is kind of the king of. There's a reason behind that, because it's simple, it's easy. It tells a story without necessarily going beyond what you see at first, what kind of the data suggests to you, without actually questioning the data. And that's where I think the way we could, and we can obviously quantify how important brand is for acquisition is via the right measurement. You mentioned earlier MMM, incrementality testing. Those are measurements that have been around forever. But imagine someone who has been constantly ingrained in this mentality and this mindset of doubling down on a single channel, because that single channel is easy to read the data of and is really relatively easy to manage and so on. Imagine these kind of people having to drive for such a big project like a media mix modeling, which is an econometric project. It's got nothing to do with the background of, or very little to do anyway, with kind of pure acquisition background. You need to have a skill set that goes beyond driving the user. But if you do get there, even without taking any kind of data scientist sort of course or anything like that, when you do get there, you can really appreciate and quantify how brand and branding activities actually help acquisition. And you will be actually surprised then what you see. But again, it's all quite difficult because we as acquisition sort of marketeers, we have to get a little bit out of our comfort zone to be able to actually properly examine data that would basically be the result of MMM, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that because especially when you look at the branding and acquisition, I mean, it's, you know, you can't just look them as both separate. You've got to look them together. So you've got the awareness piece on branding, and then you basically tell the story of who you are, and then sort of, you know, and then get that in. And then comes the consideration piece. But even, so, you know, you kind of where the branding stops, the acquisition really starts. So, you know, you can't have just one, you know, you can't just put money on PPC and then think magic's going to happen. You've got to have that brand search. So it needs to work together, or, you know, the numbers are going to look like.
I really like this example, right? I remember I had a conversation once with a marketer that told me that the best return on advertising spent is on PPC. And I said, okay, I get that. How are you measuring it? Obviously, we're measuring it on the last click basis. Okay, understood. Now, what's the consequence of that? The consequence would be just pour all your money in Google Ads, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Now, does it make sense from a kind of marketing point of view? Probably not. Yeah, it might make sense short term, but like long term, you know, you will lose brand recognition and so on and so forth. So I think it's really, you know, marketers need to be aware of that, that there is much more than just, you know, a CPA. Obviously, CPA is super important. Right? Everybody knows that, but it's, I think, the combination and the broader vision on that topic that is required. And to be honest, I think other industries are to be a bit self-critical on our industry, are a bit more far advanced when it comes to those things. Yeah,
yeah, if I can just interject here. Yes, and I think I completely agree with you. And I think one of the reasons behind that is because sometimes in this industry we are a little bit too pragmatic, which, like, I'm sure in the audience as well, people will go like, yeah, okay, fine, but PPC does give you the MDPs. Oh, yeah. PPC does give you the registration and so on. The question is, for how long? What kind of user in the long term again? And how sustainable that is? Because we have seen, again, or our own, you know, I kind of can speak by experience, unfortunately, in some cases where we have doubled down on that channel. Again, I have PPC background, so I think I can speak badly about PPC. I'm kind of entitled to that. So double down on PPC, double down on the last click channels. And then we ended up looking at things like the brand searches, which is a brilliant point, or survey results from kind of our third-party partners that were asking prospecting customers whether or not they would sign up with us or whether or not they knew about the brand. In some cases, there were quite negative results, although PPC had a really good CPA. But at the end of the day, we were basically capping our growth at the top of the funnel, which meant that PPC only could have had a number of people to funnel through and become NDPs or registrations, but at some point they would have dried up.
That's exactly, so you've got to work, you've got to have basically both to actually, you know, see that growth. Yes, you see ROI, you could look at PPC ROI, say, yes, I'm hitting 2,000 or 3,000 deposits a month through PPC, but you know, there is always a room to grow unless you sort of start investing in the top of funnel, which then gets your brand search, and then, you know, drive that volume up. So yeah, it's got to work together.
But are you guys seeing brand search? Sorry, again. Are you guys seeing brand search as part of PPC? I mean, technically it is, I know, but
no, you go.
Thank you. It's not part of PPC as such. We have been sort of internally, while we wait to fully develop an MMM, we have been looking at brand searches holistically and understand if you plot, for example, the brand searches on a graph and you put in above the line spend on that same graph, what is that graph telling you? Obviously, if there's any statistician in the audience, they would probably be laughing at me right now because it's not a very kind of statistically driven approach, but it's temporary anyway. And it still gives you some sort of ideas as to whether or not there are some spikes in the, in your searches that then you might want to look into further and see, right, did I have an increased TV exposure on that day or on that week? Did I have a programmatic campaign on that week? Or did I go live with YouTube on that week? These kind of things. Obviously, there will be noises, and that's, again, why it becomes complicated.
Yeah.
It's not easy. But there are steps that we can take to at least get an idea of where we are heading, which, in your point around sponsorship, if I look back at 5 years ago, 6 years ago, in our industry, I would have probably counted, a couple of operators who were even thinking about actually quantifying the value of those sponsorships.
The lines between those channels are being blurred as we move on.
Absolutely.
Like you said before, you see acquisition teams buying digital out of home. You see PPC teams buying YouTube because it's via Google Ads. You can see these different channels are having a performance effect and a brand effect. So you're becoming dual experts just by being there and being in it. Affiliates can provide different value from post-click measurement, but also from brand measurement. Even further than that, they're creating a retention effect as well. So bolstering your overall revenue too. And they're still being managed by the same teams. So you are becoming a holistic expert, even though you could be channel specific. Yeah.
And I think it probably is because of tech as well. Like if you look at Google Ads, PPC managers managing YouTube. Why is that? Because you usually use the same platform to buy both. And I think, to your point, out of home and out of home is being managed by acquisition. Because out of home is increasingly bought via programmatic means, and so DSP, and that's why then programmatic teams are much better versed in setting it up and even negotiating those deals than traditional out of home people, because that's kind of the evolution of tech. And it's good because from our side, we have been in this kind of tech environment for a while. That's our bread and butter, because that's what acquisition has always been sort of dealing with, including AI. So we should be sort of happy about that, to be honest.
But consequently, that could mean that going forward, like mid or long term, there are no acquisition teams that operate this anymore, but just marketing teams. No. But you become the marketing team, right?
Yes.
No, but honestly, like if these channels are more blurred, like why distinguish between acquisition and branding, or distinguishing so hard? Because with all the points that you said are totally true. Yeah.
If you study marketing, there's no distinction. When I studied marketing, there was a marketing in the books was always written that there was a marketing department, not an acquisition and branding and retention department, and that's quite telling as to kind of what should be the case.
I mean, now, especially at Betway, we do see like the brand team and the acquisition team working very closely, like than before. So, even with the sponsorships that we are doing right now, I mean, it's a very much working close with the brand team in terms of how much acquisition can actually be integrated into sponsorships as well, which again on the branding side. So a good example is there where you've got the QR codes or, to download the app and sort of, get the user engaged. I mean, you're looking back, say 15 years ago, you've never seen all those. So it's very much working together with the brand team, how much you can actually squeeze.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's so much going on right now. Even with collaborating on the social channels, for example, with the clubs. You actually engaging with the fans to sort of, communicate your message. I wouldn't say, you should work in silos. It's got to be a work together to get the brand out there a bit more.
As we lean more heavily into the influence of brand, though, we are accepting that acquisition is going to become harder to attribute, so whether it's last click, first click, etc. So not specific to this, and probably most of the marketers in the room will have the same problem, but how do you report upwards that you're essentially going to move away from something that has tangible ROI? Kev?
Yeah, I mean, Niki said it before, like acquisition traditionally, like every penny is scrutinized about where you're spending it. Generally, a CFO is now used to kind of seeing acquisition will deliver this many FTDs, this much value, this much profit. But that caps growth. Like Angelo said, like that will, if you're just investing into your lower funnel, you're not growing the brand. And now as, subject matter experts here, we have to be, evangelists for a different approach. And understand, well, from our point of view, we understand as marketers that you have to be investing in your brand in order to feed that lower funnel. But to report up, you need to get buy-in from them. And the way to get that buy-in is from the data that you have. Especially, we're so blessed in the digital space that everything is tracked. You can, I think maybe we're probably a bit, beyond the point of creating multi-touch models and things like that. But things like MMM are very, very important to kind of like demonstrate, how to grow a brand and how that feeds your revenue. And we as advertisers are sitting on such rich amounts of data that we can, manipulate the figures and kind of make a business case to our CFO to kind of, believe in what we're believing. And at the end of the day, if you don't test something new, you won't learn anything.
So with that then, with the mention of data, let's turn the conversation to data and technology. So open forum, anyone can jump in. How are they being used to sharpen the tools in the betting and gaming industry today?
It's a lot with the AI and machine learning stuff. It's, especially with the coming out of the DCO, for example, which we never had it like 4 years ago. We never had it. It's more sort of how much you can actually engage with the customers at the right time. So with the stuff like live odds integration on the banners, you basically is on that event on a specific moment, basically telling the user that this is happening. Especially on the creative optimization side. That's another key. You're there, especially with the, and then what else was there? So, even with the machine learning, you could even start looking at the churn rates for the users, sort of coming up with predictive models, like, are these users going to churn in the next a month or, something like that. So you can actually build models against it. I'm not quite sure if anyone started building on it, but yeah. So, even with those stuff, you could actually look into it. DCO even plays a big part in terms of retention offers as well. So where, someone's added a bet slip, you left it, you could even retarget those users in terms of what event they've actually placed a bet on. So you kind of get that deeper into the audience. It does play a key part on acquiring users.
No, yeah, I mean, absolutely. And so the engagement with the customer or the prospective customer for sure. I think I go back to the measurement because I think I've seen throughout my career a lot of examples of extremely exciting projects that were about how to engage with the customer better, how to do specific things better. And then when it came to measuring the impact of that, that's where silence sort of dropped. And I think nowadays, again, I hear this sentence in any context, but we are in a bit of uncharted waters in terms of how things like artificial intelligence can actually help on the measurement side. Yes, absolutely to do stuff and then to enhance the engagement with customers, but also to gain insights from the sheer amount of data that we have. We sit on, like any other Aussie company, on an incredibly big amount of data, first-party data, and the kind of how to interpret that data, what kind of insights we can get from it is crucial for our decisions, whether it would be marketing decisions, whether it be acquisition, branding, whatever. So I think, going back to the tech that we can use, I'm really excited to see how this tech, so AI and AI-powered tools, can help us make decisions, because again, that kind of decision-making process can be enhanced by the tech that you use, by AI and so on. And that, right now, is made possible by kind of all the innovations that we see happening. So even the decision-making process will change and has been changing based on that tech. And that's what really kind of excites me, seeing how we can improve our decision-making process thanks to new tech.
We need to recognize where we are as an industry. We are past the point of stick out the biggest offer that you can possibly get.
Definitely.
And just have people flood in, and that will be profitable. It's not anymore. Users want to know what you're going to add in terms of value as a product, right? And the only way to know what you're presenting is through data. Or what will add value is through data. And again, just leaving on the fact that we're a gambling industry, if you're coming at it from a sort of product-first point of view, any new innovation is going to be copied within the first 6 months, right? So if you're not constantly understanding what your user base wants through your data and changing that up in terms of what you're presenting in terms of a marketing message, then you're going to be falling behind.
Just to add to that, right? I think what we see in this industry is products. To your point, the end products are more and more similar, right? And that's nothing against anyone. It's just things that work will be copied. To your point, yeah. And also, obviously, suppliers like Sportradar are not helping there. At least, I mean, obviously they are helping because they're kind of spreading innovation much faster. But you know, when we get out new stuff, now offering, I don't know, micro bets, there is an easy way to get it to a lot of players quickly. So in the end, this commoditization of the product automatically leads at some point, in my eyes, to more of a, you know, the brand will become more important, because if everything is the same to a certain extent, and don't take it as an offense, but you know, it's more and more becoming similar. You need to find ways where you can differentiate, and either you kind of go into a certain niche and say, you know, I'm focusing on X, Y, Z, or if you stay broad, most of the operators currently do, then it's about the brand, about the trust that you give. It's about you know, just being better than others in transporting your message.
What if you are better than others in actually reading the data, what the data tells you?
Whatever. There is something where you need to be better than others,
exactly,
right? Because the product itself, it will be hard to differentiate.
100%, yeah.
You need to be better at presenting that product, right?
Yeah,
and that's where things like DCO come in and AI come in, because you can be more reactive to what your data is telling you and say, you know, this is the kind of bet that people actually want to be betting on right now. Put that out there straight away. It's not down to, you know, people like us digging into Excel sheets and 4 weeks down the line creating a new banner.
Yeah.
So as we look to start wrapping up, because I have been given my 5-minute warning, I just want to ask each of you to touch on some of the future trends that you think will influence acquisition. Who wants to start us with that one?
On future trends, I just touched on the churn prediction stuff. So I think that's something that, you know, we might see in the future. Not quite sure if it's actually kind of rolled out. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there might be stuff like coming up, like to say shoppable banners, for example, where users can actually shop through a banner. So you don't actually need to go to the site. You know, you stick. So at the moment, you've got banners where it takes you straight to the bet slip, for example. You know, you could even start looking at those kind of stuff, and then would be more in terms of predictive analysis, in terms of the predictive behavior, in terms of a user, and the stuff like the first-party data that can be a bit more, you know, once because of this cookie-less stuff that's coming in, you know, the first-party data, people will start to look more into what more you can actually use it, get the best out of it. So I think these are the few stuff that, you know, you might actually see in the future. But I've also been reading in terms of also the other stuff is of the blockchain, and the AI fraud prevention stuff, which we've actually seen in Betway. We had publishers coming in, basically piling up and sort of stealing the organics through click spamming and stuff. So basically they're hijacking, but obviously we caught it in it. But you know, but there will be more tools that will actually come in terms, especially on the blockchain side. You know, you would start seeing more sort of advanced fraud prevention tools that can sort of support, you know, this acts like domain spoofing and, you know, many other stuff that would come in. So I definitely think, you know, a few innovations would definitely be coming on the future. I think these.
I think from my perspective, again, I don't want to kind of repeat myself, but I think the data element and more data and attribution. So more and more companies in our space will, and have already started questioning, and rightly so, their data and how they gather their data. And sometimes, obviously, we have been forced to do that as well, either by, obviously, regulation or kind of the technology, specific technology providers that kind of limit the opportunity of sharing data and so on. Like when we talked about the cookieless world that we are already in, and increasingly will be the case. I think, again, using AI to extrapolate insights from the sheer amount of data you have and then making decisions based on what that is telling you, I think is going to be a big change. It's a broad, very broad category. So that includes MMM, MTA, so loads of different new ways of looking at your data that will ultimately change the way you work.
I think supply path optimization is going to be something that becomes ever more important this year. As we kind of evolve our tech stacks and we understand a bit more about, where we're putting our ads and what we're buying, we can see, throughout that supply chain, who is genuinely adding value for us. And if there are, 5 different actors within the supply chain and they're all adding value, then fantastic. If 3 or 4 of them aren't delivering any value, then we need to be able to pivot away from that and curate our own inventory and work closer with our publishers so that we can access the best inventory at the best rates and we're not, having wastage anywhere within that journey.
Yeah, I mean, you guys mentioned most of it. Yeah, I think the topic of personalization is super important, and the basis of that is somehow data. I think we'll see more marketing teams coming closer together again, as we said before. Obviously, AI will play a role. I would have to lie if I knew what exactly that can do, but it's obvious that this will have a big impact. I think what I believe is going to be super important is just to add to that is the importance of first-party data, right? And I think this will not only require brands, operators, or any other kind of brand that want to do marketing to collect their own data, but also try to find smart ways to collaborate with entities that do have data. Yeah? And I was told I should not make too much advertising for Sportradar here, right? But there is a product of a project that we've just recently launched. It's called Fan ID, where we're trying to do exactly that. We're trying to encourage rights holders who do have a lot of first-party data to share that in a GDPR compliant and structured way with advertisers. And I think there will be more models like that coming up, because in the end, publishers, federations, anyone that has a direct consumer relationship, they sit on a lot of first-party data, which is incredibly interesting for any brands. And finding smart ways to get that working technologically, I think this will also be something we'll see in the next years.
Well, we could talk about this all day, and we've tried to address the key topics: brand, technology, data. Really, when you boil it down, though, it sounds like it's get the right message to the right person on the right channel at the right time. Solved. So easy. But with that, we're going to move and take some questions for our panelists. So does anybody want to kick us off? I see one being raised.
Hi. Sorry, I can't resist. Really interesting on some of the points that Rahoul and Angelo made there. I was wondering where innovation actually really sits as an importance within your organization, or is it just a nice to have? So when teams come to you with innovative ideas, is it like, yeah, that's great, and you park it somewhere, or do you actually try to find a workaround for that measurement piece that you said was always an issue?
No, we do try to, obviously the idea is great, and then obviously we do try to sort of push through. But again, you kind of fall into typical to all the industry, all the business, you may or may not fall into, if it requires a dev, you may or may not fall under the dev queue. But again, it's always been prioritized in terms of if the idea is good and if it's actually going to change the game, it would actually be pushed through. Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah? I mean, I can keep asking questions. You don't want to
Does
unleash
anyone
me.
else have a question before the mic is... Oh, it's moving along itself.
As
There we go.
I'm here,
There we go.
you spoke about a number of different measurement solutions like MMM, last touch attribution. How do you deal internally if they contradict each other from like maybe above the line measurement to below the line measurement? And then do you have a fallback that you use to actually set budget at channel level 4? Is the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, or second question is, as you're utilizing more brand in your funnel, building brand salience hasn't got like a definitive timeline. So does that impact your like planning cycles internally at how you're kind of forecasting and setting budgets versus like user acquisition where, to your point, you said there's always an ROI, there's always a tangible output. So.
On the first question, regarding how we, so the different measurements and what if they are contradicting each other. Well, that's a great question because we are guilty of being very granular with our measurement sometimes, well, historically, which sounds almost like a bit contradictory. But in reality, this kind of habit of having very granular data, user-level data, all obviously GDPR compliant and so on, but still being able to attribute everything to the single user, that is simply not going to be possible anymore. It's already now a struggle, and we know iOS is not possible full stop. Is increasingly going to be so. So I mentioned this because this leads obviously to a different mindset when it comes to measurement. You can't be relying on exactly the user level data and go like, right, if I don't have it, then that's it. I'm not going to measure that. You need to have faith in those statistical methodologies that are not perfect. They, by definition, they have a margin of error. They are sampled. They are based on coefficient. For example, the regression models are based on coefficients. But once you are locked in after testing it versus your last click model, for example, once you understand the margin of error or kind of the variations that can be between the different models, you have to stick to one model. You can't, in the long term, continuously try. You can try to improve the model, and you should, obviously. But jumping between models, trying to find the Bible is going to be basically impossible in the future. You really have to hire the right people when it comes to data scientists, or if you want a third party, go with a trusted third party, and stick with that kind of methodology. Question it at the beginning, keep improving it, but don't completely change it from time to time, because otherwise you really lose the meaningfulness of a measurement in the first place.
So just speaking from my first-hand experience, those models do often contradict each other. Like you will see that one model will tell you to invest your money someplace else, the other one will say that, and you kind of don't know where to go from there. That's again where you as subject matter experts need to kind of take a leap of faith, but based on your understanding, and think that one makes more sense to me, and test it. Like the most important part is test it. And if you test it and it fails, that's still as important as a learning as testing something and being successful.
Of course, because you can calibrate it as well. Like it's not like you failed, that's it.
Exactly.
Like you can calibrate it.
And going back to one of the questions, if your CFO turns around to you and says, we tried this and we lost loads of money, you'd be like, well, don't do that again then.
And if nothing of that works, just work with Sportradar, because they will always make things work for you.
And then there was a second question as part of it, right? Regarding sponsorship, was it? Yeah. That again, in my opinion anyway, that also is down to measurement. If you are planning and measuring on a, say, for MMM, for example, is a couple of times a year, 6 months, or let's say maximum once a quarter, when it comes to MMM, so to make strategic decisions, that's when you should evaluate and assess all aspects of marketing. I'm not talking about obviously the granular the different channels. So at channel level, that's MTA, that's a kind of a different conversation. But on MMM, you can't do that every week because it wouldn't make sense. It's a much more strategic conversation. That has to happen, say, once a quarter or once every 6 months. So that's probably where I will place sponsorship and all elements of your marketing strategy.
Probably got time for one more question, if I see a hand go up anywhere in the audience. No? Awesome. Well, in that case, we will close up. So thank you for listening, and thank you to our panelists for sharing their insights with us.